Welcome to Learning cEDH, the podcast dedicated to teaching you everything you need to know about competitive Commander whenever we get to actually doing it. I'm your host, Matthew. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Eric. And today, we're doing the big one. We're doing the one you all know and love. We're doing the quarterly update. That's right, 2024. It's already almost 2025, it feels like. We're already in April. We're zooming through the year, and we are taking a look at the first 3 months of cEDH here in 2024.
Yeah, sorry about my absence lately. I've been super busy with like adult stuff, I just recently opened a business back in January, and we have been growing that one pretty rapidly. We're already looking at the third location of that one to open up. And I actually already owned another business prior to that as well. So I have 2 LLCs. So I've just been like kind of swamped lately. And when I do get a chance, and I've got honestly nothing new to bring to it's like, top 16, a couple events, whatever, this guy's also top 16 event. We should have been like led with the, like, we both top 16 question mark, like, and then do like some ridiculous, thumbnail pics. So
we broke the meta with Tymna Kraum.
What? Yeah. So, I mean, that's about it. Like, so, and honestly, nothing really crazy developments. I think, honestly,
it's also felt like I've done so much solo content lately that it's felt like I record a podcast every other day. It's just me talking to myself. I'm my own co-host in those ones. Yeah, but that's been a lot of fun, and it kind of has made it to where it's like I talk about cEDH so much more than I used to. Like, I'm doing so much more content that it has made it a little bit harder to feel like maybe I have something interesting to say about it, because again, like I said, I talk about decks all the time now, but it probably would be nice to just have one place to put certain kinds of info, maybe do more podcast episodes when we can. But yeah, both been busy. But we were both really looking forward to the quarterly update because this is always really fun to do. It's changed up a decent amount. There were some like really big movements on the list. I mean, I think a deck that's always been on here is completely missing, and they're like way down. I think one totally new face, one returner that nobody likes, and I like it at least. Nobody else seems to like it. And yeah, a lot of movers and shakers, and some interesting stats to talk about.
But real quick, didn't you just do something this last weekend? You top 16 event?
Yeah, I went to CCS. It was a pretty small event, but they did a little 1K, and I've seen people
just
in like
a little 1K.
Yeah, I've seen people in the Tymna Kraum Discord who were talking about going, and I have a group of like 5-ish. Sometimes we get up to 8 cEDH players at my store. 3 of them ended up going with me, and we all went down there. I top 16'd with Tymna Kraum, and one of my friends top 16'd with Obnixilis. It was a lot of fun. I really like we've talked about CCS a couple times. We've both been there. Super awesome venue. I will say from where I live to Atlanta is maybe like just a little bit too much of a drive for a 1-day trip and playing Magic all day and coming back. So I might not go to too many more of the 1-day events unless I like make a weekend of it. But the venue is great. Everything about how the event was ran was great. It was a little weird playing at an event there that wasn't like 250 people or something crazy like all the ones I've been to have been. But it was a ton of fun. Lots of people playing there. People playing Dan, people vintage cubing. There's just a big tabletop convention going on in the background.
No, that's awesome. That's great to hear. So,
and I cut bad cards before I went in. I cut Boromir and Dauntless Dismantler. I was like, I was on like 15 creatures in TNK. I was like, I'm done with these. I'm not doing this anymore. I changed up the list a little bit and went on. I played Smothering Tithe, which I've been testing and liking. I've been testing Necro and I didn't like it, so I didn't bring it. And then I brought Windfall over Boromir, which is the very last second change based on like, okay, what card in Rogsai can I put in instead of Boromir? Because Boromir's been fine, but it's just like not the way I've been liking to play. My biggest issue in tournaments has been I don't get a way to present a win or do something like really proactive. And so I was just trying to cut out some of the stuff that don't do that for things that can push me forward a little bit. And yeah,
well, that's awesome.
Felt pretty good.
Good to hear. It's good to hear. We got a couple of top 16s between us now. Now that we're now the clout could just keep raining.
Yeah,
right.
I can't escape
16 with.
Yeah, very clout. Yeah, so much clout from being a a brave person willing to play Tymna Kraum in a cEDH tournament nowadays.
Yeah, I was gonna say like I was like Tymna Kraum. Like obviously I'm an old Corvold stan guy, just battling up. I got 2 top 16s this year with Corvold. I feel pretty
Covered one
solid
of
with
them
that.
here on the channel. If you missed that one, that was the March Madness tournament. I covered that one.
That was a pretty good size event too.
Yeah.
But that was a cool event. I know that was like a few weeks ago, but this is the first time I've been on in a little bit. So,
yeah.
But yeah, Matt's already covered all that good stuff. Big surprise. Played Corvold. Nothing super spicy.
Did have the Minskin Boo. I think that was probably one of the slots that stood out the most to some people.
My whole thought process was I'll be honest with you, like I haven't got a chance to really do a ton of like test playing and altering, and like the last thing I really did was like probably my hybrid Japanese list with, by the way, one of those like top 4 or top 16 in an event this last weekend, which is kind of cool. And that person's probably got to play more with it than I have. I just haven't had any really big opportunity, or nor so the desire and drive to try to play more or reconfigure a deck, because I think it is what it is. It's like going to be like, it's going to be always a struggle to like probably get in those top 4s or whatever. I also don't have sideboard saw and halves and dock sides, so it makes it a little more challenging.
Definitely suboptimal not to bring those.
Almost every match I play in, people make that comment of like, "Oh, watch out, he might have a second dock side," and I go, "Well, it's not a second dock side. It's actually saw and half." I'm so tired of hearing it. Like
I hear about it anytime Corvold comes out. Yeah, I don't even play Corvold. I'll just be at a tournament, someone will mention Corvold, and then immediately it's joined the ranks of, this is a video I've really wanted to do, of the like bad cEDH strokes that I'm sick of hearing. Of like somebody plays a battle bond land. Oh, we all concede. Your land comes in tap. There's so many cEDH strokes I despise. Use the link in the description below to download Whatnot, and you'll get $15 to use to buy Magic singles, sealed product, get anything that you want, really. There's no limits. You just get $15 on the account for free just for signing up. This is one of the best ways you can support the channel. And again, it's just free stuff. Use the link in the description below. Give Whatnot a try. Welcome to TopDeck.gg, your community's home for everything competitive Magic has to offer. Whether you're hosting an event, playing for a huge prize, or trying to advertise your store to thousands of players, we've got you covered. Using intuitive pairing software, playing Magic is a breeze. All your players have to do is sign up online, then scan the QR code in store. Give your competitors the gift of perfect information as their bracket updates in real time. Then, when the match is decided, our self-reporting software saves you time and leaves paper match slips in the past. Leave the heavy lifting to us so your community can sit back, relax, and have a great day of playing Magic. So, this is your first time watching, which it might be. I think the last time I did one of these, the channel was at like 4,000 subscribers or something. I don't even know. It's been crazy lately. So, if this is your first time here, what we do is every quarter, so every 3 months, we take a look at EDH Top 16, looking at tournaments that had 64 players or more, kind of our cutoff for major events. And we look at the top performing decks within that quarter. So what we're looking at, kind of what forms the list, is you can kind of look at it more as a meta breakdown, because it's the decks that have the most top 16s, not necessarily sorting by like conversion rate, which is how many entries versus the number of top 16s that they had. But we look at those numbers when we discuss this. So for example, a deck down here at number 17, Clark Sakashima. Not going to make the list here, but it had 4 top 16s. It had 19 entries, so it had a 21.05% conversion rate. So 21% of Clark Sakashimas that entered in these events got to top 16 with the deck. That's pretty good. That deck had fallen off pretty hard, and that's actually like, it's been on a bit of a comeback. I've noticed it in my coverage.
We'll talk about it later, because I've noticed we were getting a lot more of like 50-ish plus events. So it's like a really meaty 40 to 50 player event. So, some of those events are really high level, and there's all these like kind of Discord tournaments that are popping up now that are kind of all the names you see. Might have to look and readjust from there. But as for today, it is 64 plus people, and it's from January 1st this year till now. So it's the first 3 months. It's a quarter review. So
yeah, it has been tricky, because a big thing we want to make sure we do is keep one standard of, this is what we look at. It's not our opinion of what the top 10 decks are. We're not gonna shift it each month or each time we do one of these to, change up the numbers so that it's harder to follow, or that it favors a deck that we prefer or something. But I will say, again, like recently I've been doing tons of tournament coverage. So I've seen that there are way more events that are like pretty high level in terms of competition, but they're not quite meeting the 64 number. It is something to think about and something to consider, that there will be some omissions here, but this is just the way that we started doing this a year ago at this point. For the time being, this is how we're going to continue to do it, at least. Real quick, before we get into it, I want to quickly do a big thanks to all of the patrons over on Patreon. Probably going to be changing the Patreon here soon because there are tons of people reaching out about decks and wanting me to just like talk with them privately and go over their deck list. So that might be something that we look into, but just want to thank all the patrons over there. Thank you to topdeck.gg, not Eminence. It's not their name anymore, guys. Get it together, for sponsoring this channel and this podcast. We're going to be at a big event of theirs coming up soon. The Cowdown Throwdown. No, dang it. I messed it up. I said Cowdown. The Cowtown Throwdown over in Columbus, Ohio. cEDH 12K that we're both going to be at, which sold out immediately. I can't even advertise it.
But that event's going to be quite excellent. I'm really excited because obviously Matt's going to be there, myself, and then Christian, he's coming. So
nice.
That's going to be, that'll be a really just fun experience. And then Punt City 3 is this weekend.
That's true.
If you are going to be at Punt City 3, I will be there. I have not got my list figured out at all. In fact, it will be in the darkest hours and days when I complete it. So
I think with all that being said, though, we are ready to hop into it. And we're going to start it off with a couple lists that didn't make the top 10 that we want to talk about. Notable decks that did not make this top 10 that were on the last one are Talion, which is at 13, so just outside of kind of the range that we're going to be looking at today. It's got 5 top 16s, 31 entries, 16% conversion rate, so a little bit below those top performers are at. This has just been a deck that's kind of hovered around that, 15 to 10 range kind of since it's been a thing, so nothing too crazy there. But Kinrith, the Return King, is the other deck that's missing here. And it has been a staple, of, I think, of every single one of these that we've done. Maybe missing the first one, but I think it's been in all of them. Usually in the middle. It was like, I want to say it's floated around from like 8 up to 5 maybe at its peak in one of these. And here we got it all the way down at number 18 on the list with 4 top 16s out of 46 entries with an 8.7% conversion rate. A really big drop off in all the numbers other than entries. I feel like entries, that's about where it's been, the 40 to 50 range, but just not converting now. What do you think? What's up with Kinrith?
So my opinion with the Kinrith, and obviously I don't know this for sure, but I feel like if I'm a Kinrith player and I'm looking at, and this is just coming from purely objective, like I want to do well in a tournament, but I really enjoy the 5-color suit piles, I probably just switch to Sisay and go from there, because I feel like the new clam chowder build of Sisay, which I'm pretty sure we'll talk about when we cover Sisay, that is effectively kind of what Kinrith does, but it also has the Sisay like element to it as well. And it's a 3-mana commander versus a 5-mana commander. Yeah. So you get to cut all your free interaction on like way earlier. That would be my guess. That's my most educated guess outside of just it not converting. I'm not sure. Like, I feel like Kinrith is like just this really good deck, and I don't think it's ever a bad choice. But if you're gonna try to do the mid-rangey stuff, then there's Kinnan, there's Sisay. So those 2 decks alone are kind of not inherently what you're doing, but those are all part of it. Because like some of the Kinrith decks run Kinnan, like you just get Kinnan in the command zone. I'm not sure. I'm not sure as to why it's not converting. I would say some of the players are probably opting for a different variety of deck.
I definitely think Sisay's gotten a lot of its shine. Like if your thing was 5-color creature combo mana outlet in the zone, then Sisay is doing that really, really well. If your plan was lots of colors, doing Breach, Thoracle, ad nauseum, whatever, Kinrith has always just been like kind of a touch slower than the other decks that do that. Slower than Najeela. It has kind of less advantage, and it's also a little bit slower than Tymna Kraum, which is doing well this quarter. You don't have to worry about that. I think, and I haven't noticed anything in my coverage. Honestly, I've noticed I haven't covered it a lot. I think I've hit it like maybe twice in some of the videos that I've been doing recently. Yeah, there's like lots of branching builds. I think from what I've noticed, most of them have gone heavier on the creature activated ability combos. Those usually have more moving parts compared to like even like a Sisay, but especially like Tymna Kraum, the way that they win, or Kinnan. So I think it might just be in kind of an awkward spot. If they're very dork heavy, they could potentially be getting hit by Bowmasters. But again, there's really high performing decks on this list that get hurt way more by Bowmasters that are doing much, much better than Kinrith. So I don't think that's the case really. The fact that they do have a 5-mana commander that isn't worth rushing out, I think is a big weakness of the list. A lot of them don't run Fierce or SWAT or Jewel Lotus because it's just not worth running those cards. And then you compare that to like what Sisay does. You want Sisay out immediately. You get to turn on really broken cards. You, instead of like having a 2-card combo with Dockside, you basically have a 1-card combo with Dockside in Sisay. We're going to start off with number 10, which was on the list previously. So this is the deck that was 7th place on our last list. This is Atraxa Grand Unifier, which has 8 top 16s for 63 entries. Pretty good amount. With only a 12.7% conversion rate. This was kind of one of the standout decks of last year, I guess. Is that when that set came out? Was it the year before? You know, kind of exploded, became really popular, took over, became like the food chain deck of the format, and kind of floated around that 5 to 7 range. I think at one point it was like right there with Tivit, and maybe one of our lists even above Tivit. Been really a good performer. And I think this is the lowest we've seen it since it really established itself.
Yeah, because it was on the come up and then it kind of like leveled and then it kind of peaked back up and then now it dropped.
Yeah, this is notably a list that you'll hear a lot of like grinder types or like high level players talk about how like they don't understand how Atraxa does well ever they look at the list and it just looks so clunky and like the commander is so expensive and blah blah blah. And we've kind of talked about that. Maybe that is catching up to it. I definitely think we're in an era of tuning and optimization right now where there are lots of events, there are lots of decks to look at, and the level of competition just keeps getting higher and higher. It could be that that's the case where your commander is like the thing that sets apart, like that's what gives you an advantage in most of the early to mid game of is like, what can I do with my commander that really breaks the game open for me? And Atraxa doesn't have that until like the late game, and it's kind of almost exclusive in that it only has either you get a ton of mana and you're just doing broken stuff with it, play it early, or it's exclusively an outlet for you in the late game in a lot of instances where like you set up food chain and then it's just another food chain deck. I don't know, what do you think?
If anybody remembers the old Demon Chain Corvold list from Deco, it is literally basically the same formula. Outside, obviously adding blue cards for counter spells, but it's just tons of dorks, food chain, and then some kind of like 4-mana card that allows the deck to do a thing. Like if it's Displacer Kitten, at the time it'd have been Team or Sabertooth. Like, and then it was just a food chain deck. It obviously can protect itself well. Again, I think any deck that has multiple ways to close out a game, whether it's Thassa's Oracle combo or food chain, it just has inevitability. That's kind of the way I look at it. You hear about mid-range hell or whatever it's called, but then like most games that I've played in, like the games are over by turn 3 because turn 3, maybe turn 4, because that's indicative on the types of deck that I play. So they kind of sculpt around what I'm doing, whether I win or lose. That deck is, I don't know if people like respect it in terms of like its ability to be, speedy. They might just kind of like, it's just kind of doing its thing. It's kind of going like land dork, maybe a draw engine on 2 if possible, a bloom tender, and then all of a sudden you realize they have like 7-8 mana on turn 3, and then you kind of go, oh well, that's different. And then what do they have? They have silence effects, they have counter spells. Like whenever I look at a deck list like this, how do they fit all the dorks, all the counter spells, all the draw engines, all the black tutors, all the silence effects, like all in the one? But then you look at it and they're like, they have to make concessions because, well, they're not red, so they don't get like the Docksides and the breaches and everything, and they don't play Fierce Guardianship, so that's out of the way. So that's like a random slot they get to like throw something in. I've played with Atraxa before. I love the card. The card is awesome. I will say if Atraxa does hit the battlefield, it dominates the battlefield. But then we talked about this off camera, and I think you're going to mention this, but there is an issue with putting Atraxa into play and passing the turn.
Yes.
Because yes. So I've experienced this with the Atraxa thing where playing, in fact, it was at a CCS event, not this last one, but the one prior, where they just jammed an Atraxa and then it got copied. And then that player got an Atraxa effect. And then it was just like, after 2 Atraxa effects, neither of them won. That was so wild. But anyways, it's one of those things of where I think if you're going to play a deck like this, you might need a way to actually get rid of the Atraxa. Like there's just so many like rando clone effects in the game. There's Curse Mirror, there's all the blue ones.
Basically right now, you should assume that your opponents are on, if they're a blue player, you should assume they're on at least 2 with Fimage and Metamorph. That's like standard. They might be on up to 4 with Flesh Duplicate. Depending on their colors, they might run that over Image.
Oh yeah.
And then Imposter Mech. And then if they're red, you have like the Curse Mirror.
And Heat Shimmer. If it's a dual caster deck, they're probably on Heat Shimmer as well.
If I end my turn with a really scary permanent in play, there's like a really high chance that somebody else copies it.
I don't know any like Atraxa players like that are like, dedicated to it. So if they can tell why the deck's kind of fallen down or what their opinion is, or, is there something new that they're playing with that maybe like could bring it on the come up, please comment once this video goes live. Let us know. We're always down to be educated.
Next up, number 9. This is a returning deck. It wasn't on the previous list, but has been on list, I think, in our like June update or whatever that was, June, July last year. I know it was on there. That is Tayam Luminous Enigma, a very infamous card for some players. And it's kind of doing well here. We got 8 top 16s, 30 entries. So same number of top 16s as Atraxa, but with a much higher conversion rate of 26.67%. This is a list I think most people at this point are familiar with. It's not really a Brewer's Advantage type thing anymore. People understand that Tayam is a tempo-y stack Ciabzan thing that will try to slow the game down. We'll get to a point where it can win without casting spells. You can just very quickly out of nowhere go from I'm just trying to keep the table in control to there's no card combination that can stop me. I'm just going to loop through my deck and win at instant speed on top of anything you try to do. Not having to cast spells, using the stack in a way that is hard for typical negate style effects, non-creature counters. Being able to avoid that aspect of the game is really, really strong. The best decks in the format are trying to fight on that axis, and that's one of the strengths of Tayam is just totally getting underneath that and ignoring that entire part of the game.
So I was just actually perusing the Tayam results, and like 80, 95%. Let's see, I looked at like the first 10. I think it's like maybe 8 or 7 of those are all online. And I've just noticed that certain decks particularly do a little bit better online than they do in paper. I think there's a lot more to keep up with. Playing Magic is already like a challenging thing in cEDH because you're playing against 3 other players. You're not only keeping up with everything that they're doing, you're trying to have some form of level of communication with the pod as to, what's going on. So there's all these functions that go into it, right? And now because of the glaring issues with webcams and like cheating and all this other stuff, and I don't want to say I'm not impressed with Tayam. I just think it's a deck that comes back and forth. I also think the people that are pretty prominent with Tayam are back on it. So
yes, and they are. A lot of those players are European, and a lot of the best ways they have to play is in online events in defense of that. Though also its best performance of the quarter was second place at the Mana Vault tournament. That was like the most turbo brain tournament I've ever seen in my life. That was stacked with really high level players. And Tayam got second place at that tournament, which is kind of crazy.
One quick note about Tayam. I don't know if you've seen the actual list recently. It's not running like stuff like Coin Collector or whatever that card's called. Like
Location Money Changer?
Yes, there we go. So it's effectively just Abzan stacks, and it obviously has the cards that parlay over with the Tayam combo.
I think they've gotten much better card because they have more sack outlets that do counters, which are like the really strong Tayam cards versus just a card that just puts counters on itself. So they have been gotten new options like that. And then like some of them are doing like Insidious Root stuff. So I think they've just gotten new cards that are better than some of the worst Tayam cards.
Yeah, like the most Tayam card in the list I'm looking at, and this is actually really fundamental, by the way, because this actually shows that if they've got the deck refined and it's able to get a little bit better, then that's a good sign, right? Then that means we're having more playable, like a truthfully more playable stacks deck that also is just good cards. Like they're on more tutors, they have more land packages in there, so they're on like Life from the Loan and Aftermath Analyst. You know what that card is?
Yeah, that's the it's like 1 in a green, and then it like mills 3, and then you pay 3 in a green, sack it, put lands into play.
Yep. Yes, it's literally Splendid Reclamation built onto a creature that's also a 1/3. Pretty good card. Again, like it's got Agatha Soul Cauldron. That's just a good card. Insidious Roots. That's like kind of the most Tayam-ish card that's in the list. They're on multiple Surveil lands. Yeah, and then they're basically running like Yawgmoth, Young Wolf package. That's cool to see that that deck is gotten more and more refined, and now it's just like just a good stuff
Yeah.
Abzan deck as well.
And
So
they get a lot of a card, like almost every set has something that sacks a thing, puts a counter on something, and then it's just like you get a density of those, or just like it's just at the right cost and it does just the right amount, and then
mhm.
it just slots in, and then like the deck's gotten a lot of upgrades. It's been really interesting to see.
That's a good one. That's actually a good thing to point out is the deck has got quite a bit of upgrades. That's awesome.
At number 8, with 9 top 16s, 58 entries for a 15.52% conversion rate, we have Tevesh Kraum, which has gone from on the list to off the list to really overperformer. I think at one point this deck had a very low amount of entries and like kind of one of the highest conversion rates and win rates in the format, and now has kind of evened out to be actually a bit below average for what we see on this top 16 or this top 10 list. Has pilots who like exclusively play it and do really well. I think has been a list that a lot of newer people get pointed to for something in like the Grixis core that's strong. But yeah, showing up here at 8th. I think last time it was also 8th. So in the same exact slot, it does what it does. It's got the 2 advantages in the zone. It's got access to really good colors, kind of exactly where it was last time.
I'm just looking at like Sharky's list, and it looks like pretty normal stuff on Flesh Duplicate, Displacer Kitten, Narset Parter of Veils, Double Wheels. Obviously, getting a little bit extra out of cards like Opposition Agent, Notion Thief, Hullbreaker Horror, Displacer Kitten, getting like serve multiple purposes in this deck, obviously for Dockside Extortionist as well as Tevesh. Choosing to play both Conqueror's Fell and Defense Grid, and on Imposter Mech. Born Upon a Win, Necropotence. So I hate using this term, but it's like it's just mid-range Rogsai.
Yeah, it's like the Grixis mid-range deck. I've mentioned a couple videos that Grixis mid-range actually doing pretty well, though Turbo Grixis is actually doing really well. We'll get to that. I think this deck, the conversion rate being a little low is just, I think it's just picked up a lot of newer players on it, because I can't say the quality of player I know is new, but the number of entries has gone up a lot. And the conversion rate just kind of went down, I think almost proportional to that. I think that's kind of what, I don't think the deck is worse now in a worse position. I think there are just dedicated people who are doing well with it, and then there are people who are picking it up and playing it and kind of learning the deck and performing how you would expect them to play. The next one is probably the highlight of kind of what's new here, and we have a really big gap. Last one was number 9, or 9 top 16s. We have a big jump up to 12 top 16s at 7th place with 29 entries, the lowest on this list, for definitely the highest conversion rate here of a 41.38% conversion rate, and that is with Magda Brazen Outlaw. This deck, I've mentioned it a few times because I've covered this deck a lot recently, as you'd expect with 12 top 16s. This deck has been really going off. It looked like early last year, last time we covered it. I don't even know if we covered it, but like last time we were, really doing this kind of coverage. Decks, cards like Bowmasters eat Magda alive. There are a lot of decks that are hurt by shooting their dorks and their X1s, but this is a deck where your commander is one of those dorks and X1s. Everything you do, most of your moving pieces get hurt by Bowmasters, but this deck is just going crazy. It's gotten some upgrades, it's gotten some new dwarfs, and it looks like recent sets and like Thunder Junction specifically are going to have some really strong cards for it. Like it's only getting better, it looks like. But this deck specifically really does what I was talking about with Tayam, where it just doesn't cast spells. You play like a dork or two, and then you just do your thing, and then you just win the game. You just activate abilities, put a win into play. Really feeds on like, hey, we're in a longer mid-rangey game, then we just go off.
So the card that I've played against in Magda that's been really impressive has been the 7/1 vehicle from Doctor Who. Have you seen that card?
Yeah, is that the Titanic, I think?
Yeah, it's like it's a 6/1 or 7/1, something like a flying ball lightning or something, but it puts a ton of treasures into play. So it effectively, like with the way the deck's set up, if you get to hit with that card, you probably already have a few treasures already out. So you're gonna have your 2 Magda activations. It's a vehicle that makes a ton of treasures, so it also crews, which allows you to tap your dwarves. So I've said this before, like, the joke was like Corvold's like the Dockside deck. I don't think so. I've always said Magda is the Dockside deck. Like Magda abuses treasures like no other deck. I mean, it fundamentally gets to use treasures to put things into play without casting them. Like that is itself as a mechanic is pretty broken.
Just in the list that I've covered, I haven't looked at all of these in videos that I've done. Very, very different builds of Magda. There are some that use lots and lots of vehicles to make sure that they can really quickly just tap all their dwarves down. There are some that use dragon packages. There are some that aren't. One of the newer-ish cards that they've got access to that I've heard described as the best card in the deck is Roaming Throne. It doubles your Magda. It is an artifact dwarf. It has Ward 2 for some reason also. It does basically everything that the deck wants to do. Not even all of them still that topped are on the card currently. They are getting new cards. Auto Cap Blast in Fallout. That is like a removal spell that the extra damage it deals gives you treasures. They make new treasure cards basically every set. Treasures are like evergreen, or at least deciduous. They got a lot going on, and they've been really good. We even got a new Magda printed. It doesn't look like it'll actually be that great. A nice thing about, we mentioned how Bowmaster kills all your stuff. People remove Magda. Thing is, the whole way you're doing the Magda thing, you're just making mana. If you're not using the treasures to activate Magda, you're setting yourself up to recast Magda and redo the thing. And if you don't just lose early on, you're just going to get to a point where Magda is going to be able to try to win on top of you. That's the thing. They were running dwarves from like the 90s and the deck was doing well. And now they're running dwarves from 2023, from 2024 that actually have text on them that isn't like target green creature loses first strike or something like that. Like they actually do stuff on the card now.
And to just key on what Matt said, if the Magda does get removed, they just recast it. I don't want to say it's red Kinnan, but it's very similar to how Kinnan operates in that sphere of being a 2-mana commander, easy to remove, but still, because I've heard Max talk about this, it's the best way to deal with Kinnan is to actually deal with the dorks and not just the Kinnan itself sometimes, because that's actually the problem. Because then all right, Swords to Plowshare Kinnan. Okay, cool. Tap my dorks, recast Kinnan. And because of their mana comes from artifacts and their dwarfs, you can't attack both at the same time. Like Fiery Covenant doesn't hit creatures and artifacts.
It's hard to do it with a lot of the cards that you'll see in most cEDH decks.
Except for Culling Ritual. That seems to be maybe a card that I wish more decks could take advantage of what that card can do.
I've cast it against Magda. It felt great. Felt amazing.
No, Magda's a really cool deck. I like it. I think it's pretty good. And it makes a lot of sense why it's here.
Next up, we're taking a look at number 6, which had 15 top 16s with 45 entries.
This deck sucks.
With a 33.33% conversion rate. We were kind of doom and gloom on it last time. This deck was at number 9, actually, which was the lowest it had ever been in our top 10 video. And that is Rograk and Silas, which was not really performing very well last time we saw it. We thought the way it was trending, a chance that it wouldn't be on this next video. And here we actually saw a whole lot of rock size show up, do the thing. 15 top 16s, 33% conversion rate. The list hasn't changed a lot. There's been a little experimenting with a few things. You got Mikey playing Winter Orb. We'll get that out of the way. Which I like the idea of some of the testing, and some of the stuff they're doing is stuff you can watch some of these older ones where I was like, why don't we just play Talion and like just run a whole bunch of draw engines? And we've seen some experimenting with that. There's like a few slots, like 2 slots ish that decks are testing. Some have gone up on Phantasmal Image where they weren't running it before. Again, some are on Talion, some are on the One Ring, but Roxai has just been showing up and performing well. It does what a lot of these other decks do. It does it faster. If you're in a TNK pod, you're doing what they do, but you're doing it way faster. Or at least a bit faster. It also did get a little bit of an upgrade with Undercity Sewers. I think a lot of them have cut Mount Doom, which was, in my testing, kind of awkward, and I guess some people have agreed. And then we're seeing one Surveil land in a lot of the rock size, and in general in 3 or less color decks is something that these decks have been testing.
I'm looking at the highest performing Rogsai list, and it just looks like every other Rogsai list that's on here. I'm trying to see, again, the only really true standouts is the Undercity Sewer. Our beloved Bryant Cook, he was discussing this card and slotted it in. And outside of that, that's about it. I mean, just getting the fact of the way that this deck operates, because this deck can literally operate with no untapped mana in terms of lands, especially on the first turns. It just really makes that Surveil land so free. The reason why you don't probably see it as much in green decks is because they're trying to cast a dork on turn 1. So a turn 1 tap land doesn't make a lot of sense in the deck. For the most part, it's probably why you don't see it as much in those. And Tayam's a little bit different because Tayam's running a ton of lands. There's a big difference of running a 26 land, 25, 24 land deck where your mana is so important early on versus a deck that's running 28 plus and has a land package strategy built into it with Life from the Loam versus a deck that can literally go Rograk, fetch land, Mox Amber, tap cast this, pass. And then you just get a free surveil land. So it's like, oh my, it's almost like a turn one ponder. Like it just
Yeah,
feels,
it's a
like
free spell.
it's quite good. So
You hear it described as time walk, because if you surveil the card away, you basically just took an extra turn because you were going to draw a card that you didn't want. Especially with Rogside, if you were going to draw a dead card, the difference between a dead card in that deck and a actual card in that deck is massive.
I know it's crazy because it's just like one card in the deck.
It's actually really important.
The
fact that it's fetchable, that's the big thing. You think like one card slot doesn't matter that much, but when it's a fetchable mana source that pretty much all your fetches can get it, that means your ability to go turn one, untap the mana with your fetch to do like fish or whatever, or turn one, well, I don't really have a play I want to do, I don't need the land, and getting an extra surveil, basically get to cast Consider for free. You always have that option. So it like that slot matters more than I think even most spells that you might put in the deck in terms of the amount of times you're going to see it, and or at least have the option to see it.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And it compared to Mount Doom, it's night and day.
So much better. Mount Doom,
yeah.
I don't like Atraxa. It doesn't, you don't quite get there. I don't think we're the deck for it. I tried to buy one for the event because I was going to play Rockside this weekend. I couldn't find an Undercity Sewers. And I was like, I have all the cards for my TNK list I want to play. I'll just play that. But yeah, the only other thing I'll point out is like, I think Alana's list was on like the One Ring over Grinding Station. So there's still not a consensus on Grinding Station, but it seems that most of the decks are playing it.
Yeah, she chose not to play Wheel of Misfortune. Yes, she's got the One Ring, keeping Swan Song and Days, 24 lands, Undercity Sewers. Yeah, so
I don't know if he's still off it, but last time I looked at Zane's list, he had cut Swan Song for Talion. That is crazy. You're a lunatic. But yeah, I think that's about all we want to talk about with Rockside. I'm just happy to see that a Grixis Turbo Shell is, performing really well. It's beating out the Grixis mid-range shell, which didn't seem like that would be the case last time we did one of these.
This is a deck that has ebbed and flowed, and this could be a whole nother podcast about the impact of Orcish Bowmaster, what it has and hasn't done, and like the way it's affected the format. But Najeela, the Blade Blossom, it is here at number 5. 18 top 16s, 71 entries with a healthy 25.35% conversion rate. So Najeela, who was sometimes argued as the best deck in the format over the last, I'd say, year and a half now. It's kind of weird because like I keep thinking like just a few months ago we were at the cookout and I'm like, oh well, that was actually last summer, not this upcoming summer.
Yeah.
So time's starting to slip away, and that's what happens when you print a new Magic set every 6 weeks. Yeah, Najeela doing pretty strong numbers here. Honestly, let's take just a quick look at one of the lists. We'll take a look at Larry Park, because Larry Park is just one of the names that comes to my mind about Najeela. And it's got the Grim Hirelink, got Cutzel, got Derevi, and just the really good, like 5-color good stuff. They were running one of the new cards called Grim Reaper's Sprint. Do you know what that is, Matt?
Yeah, that is a extra combat spell. It's also a haste enabler. It has Morbid, so it costs 5, but with Morbid it costs 2 mana, 1 in a red. And when you put that on a creature, it gets like +2/+2 and I think haste, and you take an extra combat. I want to say that, can't remember if the list when they played it, because I don't know, is that the list you're looking at? Is it a copy or is it his actual list, like where it links to?
I think it's the actual list.
Yeah, I think in the event that was from, it wasn't in the deck, if I remember correctly. But then, because I don't know what it is with EDH Top 16, sometimes it doesn't make copies. It links you to the actual deck. I don't know what determines that, but it has led to issues with coverage where there's cards that they start testing and then they're not actually in the deck that you click on the tournament. Zane gonna let me know. I don't know if it's event size or if it's something with the TO does it, where they set it up to go to a copy. Because a lot of the events you can go and it'll go to a copy that hasn't been updated since the event, but some of them it is. But cards with Najeela that have stood out, I don't know about Grim Reaper Sprint. Maybe it'll make it there. If it's a lot of times it will be active with Morbid, because almost always one of your tokens gets blocked. If nobody's blocking your creatures with Najeela, you're actually doing really well. It makes the fail case good, and you can kind of go into a position where you force it to happen. We saw Memo experiment with the Stack C Najeela list. That really hasn't broken through as like an archetype people are playing a lot of, but cards that he was playing, like Devilish Valet, have shown up even in the more turbo solo builds because of that card's ability to just kill a player very quickly with a couple Najeela triggers. It seems like that one might just make it there. Kutzel, a warrior that is a Grand Abolisher. It looks like that one's here to stay. Simut looks like it's here to stay. Najeela does have the issue of, having a lot of different game plans that don't always line up, but it looks like their creature game plan is still like doing well and it's strong, and there's options there that have improved it. It's gotten better, and the deck is doing well. Like 25% conversion rate is kind of that's good. That's what we're looking for at like decks that are performing really well right now that have a lot of entries.
Best placing decks, they were on 20 creatures. Most of it still looks like a good stuff 5-color deck, but they're running Chatterfang. They are running Spellskite, Tetsuko, so that's pretty cool. Other big standout is back on Druid's Repository, no Underworld Breach, and Agatha Soul Cauldron.
I like that approach. They're leaning into, they know what they want to do with their version of the deck. It's not 50 different ways that you can kind of do your game plan. It has one very solid one that it's leaning into, trying to make it work.
Yeah, so they get to cut LED, Brain Freeze, and Breach, and Ad Nauseam. So it makes the deck more resilient. And they're on the One Ring. And I don't know if you noticed, but a lot of these lists are starting to cut talismans.
Yes.
So the NBC style list is starting to get more and more condensed, and they're starting to spread back out. More so like a true hybrid version of NBC and like the original Najeela creature-based list.
One thing we don't really get to talk about because it's almost impossible for us to cover it properly is players trying to address a local meta that they expect to see. So like if hey, this is going to be a pretty stacksy metagame, the odds that I get to ritual into Ad Nauseam is like incredibly low. I'm going to bring the creature Najeela and just punch everybody. And it's not like you're having to swap 50 cards or something. You're swapping like, 10, 15 cards maybe, if like a really big swap, throwing in some creatures, taking out some of those cards that are going to be dead in those matchups, and then sticking to a game plan that, again, works well into a traditional pod. You might be a step slower than what some of them do, but your interaction is still going to be there. You just mulligan appropriately. Expect the deck to still do well in those games where even your meta call isn't being, exactly met.
No, it's very cool, though. I really like the Agatha Soul Cauldron aspect of it a lot.
Next up at number 4, we are looking at 20 top 16s with 96 entries for a 20.83% conversion rate. And that is with Tivit, Seller of Secrets. I think he's been as high as number 2, I think, at one point on our list. I feel like he's just quietly there now. I feel like there's no conversation around Tivit. At first, there was like, how is this pre-con commander doing anything? And then it was like, oh, Tivit's the deck now. And then it evened out. I think it got it kind of dropped in conversion rate where it was kind of underperforming a bit. And then now it's just kind of stable, 20%, pretty popular. You expect to see, a couple of them at a tournament when you go there. It's kind of here doing the thing.
Dauntless Dismantler looks like a new card that they've kind of ingratiated into the deck. Tishana's Tidebinder, that's been kind of a new addition. And that card's kind of perfect for that deck because that deck wants to play face up with mana available pretty much at all times. Trouble in Pairs.
Yeah, that's one we've seen in kind of mid-rangier white shells. I've even seen that I know Ori was playing that in TNK. And then we've seen, because it seemed like at first it would just be like white decks, like really low color. But yeah, we've been seeing that. They've kind of settled in on because there was some debate over should they be playing cards like Blind Obedience and Grafdigger's Cage, things like that. And then now, yeah, they're playing the Dauntless, they're playing the Draneth, of course. So it seems like they've kind of settled in. Usually expect them to see like Dothy. This is probably the deck you're most likely to see a card like that. And then yeah, newer options like Tidebinder, which show up and line up pretty well here. There hasn't been a lot of overhaul in terms of hey, we're going back to more of an all-in Tivit deck that a lot of them now don't run Nas. I think it's the majority of the ones that we see top 16 being kind of pure Esper mid-range value, grindy, time save you. But yeah, overall, I would say Tivit's in about the place we left it in. Pretty, like I said, pretty well lined up as the Esper mid-range list. At one point last year, we saw a lot more options. We did see Marnius was just barely missed this list at number 11 with 6 top 16s. So I guess it missed it by a couple top 16s. But next up with the same amount of top 16s with 106 entries for an 18.87% conversion rate. So arguably you could put this below Tivit, but they're about tied. We've got Sisay, Weatherlight Captain, which has been pretty firmly in the top 3 spot. It's usually vying for number 2 right now. It said you could arguably put Tivit at 3 right now and Sisay below it if you're using the conversion rate as a tiebreaker. This has become the one of the most popular decks, what felt like overnight at some point last year. It was a deck you expected to see, but it was kind of whatever, it might make the top 10, and then just now yep, this is super popular. super powerful. Cast with Dockside can often just win you the game just from there. Very cheap commander for a 5-color pile. Just doing amazing stuff right now.
So, have you had a chance to look at the clam chowder build? The one, I think it's the Boston area, right? That is more like 5-color good stuff, more akin to something like Kenrith, running like Minsk and Boo, Timeless Heroes, Teferi Time Rattler, Invasion of Ikoria. So, the creatures are effectively just the Kenrith creatures, like the 5-color Kenrith stuff. So, you're on like Bloom Tinder, Archivist of Ogma, Derevi, Emil. So, obviously, you still got the Emil combo, but it's on Cutzel. And then the rest is just like Thassa's Oracle, Talion, Bowmasters, Dorks, Dockside Extortionist, and then your sorceries are all kind of pretty generic: Demonic Tutor, Diabolic Intent, Eldritch Evolution, Neoform, and Mnemonic Betrayal. And then you have a Brain Freeze package. You have all your traditional counter spells, Fire Covenant. Just basically almost looks like a ported Kenrith deck over for Sisay with the ability to play your early interaction cards like your Deflecting Swats, your Fierce Guardianships, and the fact that Sisay can just tutor up Cutzel. It can tutor up Talion. It can tutor up Derevi. And then, and it's got Kinnan in it as well. So, pretty cool list, actually.
Yeah, Sisay has been a deck we've seen mainly experimenting with like the packages that we see people run. Even like the Planeswalker package, you'll see, I'd say like Dahada is a little bit less of a staple now, but it still shows up. We've seen like Geodrone Dahada come in as an untapper. Some lists will go for like more value oriented, just like creatures that are good that they can tutor up, or Planeswalkers. Some will just go strictly, this is the Sisay tutor package that combos, and then very lean creature package beyond that. I've seen like Catildas and stuff show up in the board as, utility things you can find. So there is a lot of just power in the deck and a lot of different ways you can build it, because again, you got all 5 colors. They print 6,000 different legendary creatures in every single set. Usually some of them end up just being good enough, and a lot of times they don't even need to really do a lot. They can just be lots of colors at a low mana value. That's worth tutoring for Sisay. I even saw somebody run just Felidar Guardian, just because you could just do that you could do the old Saheeli cat combo. And also you just, you have Docksides, Planeswalkers, other stuff that's worth flickering with Felidar, and you can use it with Emil to go infinite with like Gaia's Cradle and stuff like that. So yeah, just a deck that has lots of utility. It's kind of the 5-color deck at the moment, though we have again seen that Najeela is like trending back up where it was, kind of falling down a little bit last year. But this has just been like super popular. I mean, and again, it can do that thing we talked about with Magda, with Tayam, where it just sets up a board where it doesn't need to cast a spell. Somebody removes something and then boom, they just win on top of it.
If I had to pick a deck to play, like let's say somebody was like, hey, Eric, which of the 5-color decks would you grab right now? It would probably be Clam Chowder Sisay out of all of them, because it's basically doing already what Najeela does, but it doesn't have to go to combat. It just has Emil Dockside. The fact they can tutor up that part of the combo, it has a Derevi combo in it as well. So it's kind of got basically the best of the legendaries for what it's trying to accomplish.
Wouldn't be surprised if we see it at 2, or maybe Najeela overtook it and went down to 4, but I wouldn't expect that Sisay is going to suddenly perform worse. It just looks like there are some other decks that maybe are getting a little bit more focus and attention and are pushing it. But yeah, we'll see. Maybe also we could also see those other types of Sisay builds become really popular, maybe do well, or just change the way that people are approaching the deck. So at this point, you know what number 2 and number 1 are. Not surprising. I think only up to here were there any surprises. But at number 2, with 22 top 16s and 162 entries, meaning a pretty small conversion rate of 13.58%, we've got Kinnan Bonder Prodigy. Pretty far ahead of Sisay now in terms of entries. I want to say it was closer in the last one, where like these decks were both really similar numbers. Kinnan just continuing to be super popular, but kind of been struggling a little bit in events in terms of conversion. We still do see a lot of the really high level Kinnan players do well. We see the Woundeds. We see Comedian when he chooses to play the deck. Players like Ping when they are playing. I think he's been playing again more recently. So definitely players that show up and play Kinnan that have been doing well. But it doesn't seem like the average player who's picking up Kinnan is just like rocking their way to top 16 easily.
If I'm looking at this completely objectively and I'm looking at the deck list in terms of rankings, would I rather and I'm looking at this from more of a sports team's perspective, would I rather have 2 more top 16s, but I needed 160 2 tries to get there? Or would I rather have 20 top 16s and only needed 96 tries to get there? I mean, that's like a pretty stark difference of number of entries to have that conversion rate. While I understand it's based on the number of top 16s, it's still I would argue that like Sisay and Tivit are actually numbers like 2 and 3, and Kinnan's kind of down below. But
Yeah, in
that's
terms of
obviously
like
not.
overall performance, how we would
Yeah,
evaluate it. I think looking at the performance, you could kind of sort them a bit by conversion rate, especially the ones that have a higher amount. Like you would kind of think Kinnan would be down there with like Atraxa and Kraum Tevesh as the bottom three of this top 10. If we did like a tier list, maybe I'll make some kind of graphic of trying to sort them out by conversion rate versus numbers. It's a little tricky to do that, especially comparing things that have 160 entries to 30 entries is really difficult to like fairly do it. And you can kind of in a way look at our list more as like a meta share breakdown than necessarily a ranking of tier lists because yeah, I think
yeah.
looking at these numbers, the meta share of Kinnan obviously very high and has led to a lot of top 16s, but relative to the only other deck with nearly as many entries as it, which has more, it's performing significantly worse, almost half the conversion rate of that, and 5% less than Sisay, the deck that is right above.
And just to hark on what you were saying, you look at the people who are doing really well with Kinnan. You've got like Jorman, Ian, you've got Max. Tyler had a tournament win with it as well. And then when you kind of start shifting down, I don't want to say like because I know what like a lot of people would say. Oh well, it's like you figured it out like Winota, and I'm just like no. Kinnan is
No,
is a far better deck. There's also like some interesting like misevaluations of people how to play against Kinnan. Like again, people think you attack the Kinnan versus attacking the resources. I'm not sure. That I would leave that to the Kinnan experts as to why the deck has plummeted. Maybe it is because a lot of new players, or not even new players, but new players to the deck are
or
just
to
all jumping
tournaments.
in.
People just now
Yeah.
playing in their first events ever.
Yeah. It's very true.
I will say one thing I have noticed in the, whatever amount of coverage I've done is I feel like, we had Wounded here on the podcast at one point and we did like a really deep dive into his approach to Kinnan, his thoughts on the builds of Kinnan and blah, blah, blah. And what his build, you can tell that his build is very customized to the way that he plays, what he thinks the strengths are of Kinnan and his ability to pilot Kinnan and, what he wants out of the deck. But if you look at the builds, a lot of people just copy paste Wounded's list. And I think there could be an issue of maybe it's not even, I don't know what you want to take out of this, but like when you're taking a list that feels that specialized to the player and you just kind of copy paste it and run it, I definitely think you're likely to be running a lot weaker than one, somebody who has way more experience with the list, but also like they're building it the way that they want to play. And if you
Mhm.
have that mismatch, plus, you're obviously like gonna at least be less experienced on the list. I think there could be issues there too. The flex slots of Kinnan, like you can look at the deck as being solved or whatever. But if you look at like Ian's list versus Wounded's list, they're decently different. And Ian doesn't even play the deck a lot. He'll just show up and win with it. There's a lot of different things that go into these decks more than just like make mana do thing. And I will say, while Kinnan, I don't think has the Winota problem. I think if you play Kinnan in a straightforward, we'll say less experienced way, you can get punished that way. If you play the deck in a way that is, I'm relying all on Kinnan, I'm trying to slam mana quickly and do the thing. And if you get blown out by a combination of Bowmasters or early interaction because you're going in unprotected because you're playing it like a turbo list, even though your list is built to be mid-rangey. There's a lot of different smaller things I think could be leading to a deck that maybe should have a higher conversion rate here in terms of raw power level, underperforming and ended up being kind of like a bottom 10-ish level performance. And our last list definitely doesn't need an introduction, but we're going to give it one here. With 55 top 16s, yes, that is 33 more than the
Old
last deck
stick
we looked at.
fingers, right? It's old
Finally,
stick.
Golgari is back. 223 entries for a 24.66 conversion rate. Kraum and Tymna, Tymna Kraum, T and K, Blue Farm, whatever you like to call it, the deck of the format. There's not anything. I mean, we've talked at certain points last year. We said like, oh, I wouldn't be surprised if Tivit overtook it in popularity or Kinnan overtook it in terms of something or whatever. This deck could do it. Najeela was close at early last year. There is no deck on the list that gets close to the popularity and then that popularity versus conversion rate. I mean, there are obviously decks that have higher conversion rates. Like you look at Magda has the highest on this list. That's 29 entries. This is almost 10 times more entries than that list. For some comparison, bottom, I think 5 decks on this top 10 have like 225 entries. And then TNK has almost as much as those 5 decks combined. This is the deck. If you go to a tournament, you might see one of these in every single pod that you play in. I did this past weekend. So it is dominant. It's at a point where you have calls for, if not bannings, at least people just saying like, wow, this sucks. There's no reason to play a deck other than this. And I think in terms of, hey, I want to do well at a tournament, somebody asked me that, what should I play? It is hard to give them something other than TNK as the solution. And when you look at numbers like this, you look at philosophically what the deck does, what it should do in theory. I don't think there's a theory crafted, looking at one of these. We talk about Roxai potentially, like Roxai's running hot, it might be like, the better deck. But I think in terms of overall performance, what's going on in the format, what it has access to, what it does every game, like it's hard to not point to this deck as just being kind of significantly above everything else.
You would think, as much as I talk about this deck, that this would be the deck I would actually choose to champion and pilot. But for some reason, I just do not enjoy playing this deck. And I am very aware of how good it is. I'm good of the commanders, the colors, everything. I just don't enjoy it. I mean, I guess I enjoy it too. Like, it always feels good to slap down Grand Abolisher and like do the thing after that. But what's the most interesting about this is there was this narrative about TNK for whatever reason that it didn't win a lot or it didn't have good conversion rates. And as we've seen, that's just completely inaccurate. Spoiler alert, I looked at the last 12 months of TNK, and you have to get down to I think either 24th or 25th on the decks to find a deck that has a better conversion rate than TNK. So since the 1st of January and in tournaments of 64 or greater, it has won 8 events. Just a quarter alone. That's impressive. And that's not even discussing the tournaments it has won in Japan. It just won a 77-person player tournament in Japan. It seems to be good. Matt, what's going on with TNK? Why is it winning?
It's got good cards. Draws cards. Really just has access to the things, pretty much anything you might think about in terms of cards that get mentioned when you think of banning things for cEDH, or cards that get mentioned when you think of just power outliers, the best things you want access to, the best thing you can do. This deck gets access to all of them. It doesn't always do all of them to the best. It's not necessarily the best ad nauseum deck. They pretty much all choose to run it, but in terms of resolving a Naz, expecting it to win, main phase Nazing, doesn't necessarily do that the best. Doesn't really do mana production the best. Probably does do card draw the best in terms of consistent throughout the game card draw. And then that in combination with those other things it does at an average or above average level, that lines up very well with just being really busted. And then the commanders just give a level of consistency that others don't, right? The number of game plans you can have of if I want to build Tymna Kraum and I want to play it like a turbo pilot, I can try to do early ad nauseums or necropotences, which we've seen more of recently. We saw a lot of West Coast events where they chose to run cards like City of Traders, Calling the Weak. More of them were on Cabal Ritual. Saw less cards like Drannith Magistrate and other creatures, lower creature counts, and we're running more ability to just go fast and win early and do Necroborn or ad nauseum or whatever. You can do that, and then if it fails, you can cast Kraum. You can cast Tymna. You can have that backup plan. You can also do the main plan of almost every deck in this format of cast early draw engine, like Rhystic, Mystic, Esper, whatever, and then do what presents itself to you. That's kind of the strength of this deck, is if you draw enough cards, a game plan will show itself. As long as you don't lose, eventually you'll find a way to win. Whether it's Underworld Breach, Rolthos's Oracle, Bowmaster, Wheel, Loops are things you have access to, Mnemonic Betrayal. Your ability to win is just crazy. You can copy something that wins the game. A lot of these decks run multiple clones. I won a game the other day by casting Phantasmal Image, copy Atali, trigger on the stack, Vampiric Tutor for my ad nauseum, put it on top. It's just doing everything kind of better than most of the decks do. And I don't really know how you address it. I would say it's probably at the point now where it is maybe considered problematic. I mean, I had a tweet this weekend that went relatively viral of saying that my life is just looking for spicy decks in top 16s and seeing nothing but Tymna Kraum. As someone who is always on the lookout for decks that are performing well, that are, off the beaten path or whatever, more fringy. It's been a little bit harder this quarter than it was, or this past month than it was, later last year, even earlier this year, because it just seems like I mentioned this probably in previous episodes of ours, that I think Tymna Kraum is underrepresented because players are, how some people on Discord would put it, coping. People go out of their way, like you mentioned. You don't like the way the deck plays. You go out of your way to play Corvold. You've said many times you don't think it's the best deck to play in terms of winning an event.
No, absolutely not.
you choose to play Corvold. And I think there are people who play Kinnan and Sisay and Tivit and Najeela and some of the other decks on this list that think that those decks are the best deck to play. And for them, maybe they are. But if everybody who thought TNK was the best deck to play were playing it, the entry count would be like 500. 700. If you had a 100K event, the TNK percentage would be like 50 probably of the field, something like that. Like if you had really high stakes on the line. Right now, a lot of people just play to play, even the grinders. They play just to show up and get to play cEDH, and they like being able to say that they did well with the deck that they play. But when, the prize goes from like 2,000 to 50,000, something like that, even 10,000, which more reasonably we might expect to see this year. I mean, we're both going to a 12K. I think the more Tymna Kroms are going to come out, and I think the real solved version of the meta right now is even more Tymna Krom than we expect to see. And then probably decks that get underneath it well, like Kinnan still having a share, Rocksai still having a share, because they do things better than Tymna Krom, and so you can approach the format from that angle. But overall, I don't see a real argument for, if I want to do well, why I should play a deck other than Tymna Krom. It's pretty optimized now to the 13 creature package. It's pretty much always the same 13. There's some people testing, like I know Freedom is testing like No Dranith is up on the counter spells. He's back on Imseal because and back on Consult because So there is a pretty defined 80 slots, maybe even more than that, in terms of like the decks that I cover that top 16. And then there are slots that, like, I looked at a deck the other day that was running like Containment Priest and Dauntless and Blind Obedience, because they were like, it was a little bit smaller of an event, like 55-ish, and they wanted to target their local meta, which is a lot of like green creature combo-y stuff that I saw in that top 16, and they won that event. And because you have those flex slots to do, just bring the cards that work well for you, because you aren't dedicated to any one game plan. The deck can kind of do whatever. If you decide you need Necro that day, Necro, City of Traders, a couple more talismans or a few more talismans, cut a land or two, cut Cavern. That's kind of the scary part of the deck, is I don't think it's solved. And it is very customizable, more than any, like, if you look at a more synergistic shell, you start cutting lots of cards in those decks, they lose a lot of their flexibility and like what makes their deck strong. TNK doesn't really have that problem. And some of the other higher color piles don't either. But versus like Najeela, once you cut like a couple cards, a couple cards become weaker. Like if you're cutting some of your creature tutors, then your creature combos become weaker, or things like that. Whereas this deck is just pure flexibility. You always have like that random 2-drop you can run that is good enough with Tymna.
Now that's pretty fascinating. I mean, like when you look at the deck's approaches of a like 26 versus like a 28 land deck, choosing to like clearly go a little bit, I don't want to say turbo-y, but a little bit more, I'd say a little bit more turbo-y. They're on like the telltale signs of calling the weak. But then regardless, both of them are on like Necropotence. I mean, and two, if you look at blue farms, like their wins, like their top 5 decks that won a tournament, they're like 4 wins, 0 losses. There's like 5 wins, 0 losses, 2 draws. 6 wins, 0 losses, 2 draw. 5 wins, 0 losses, 2 draw. 4 wins, 1 loss, 2 draws. Not only is it winning, but it's winning with an impressive record on top of it.
We're not going to go deep into the top 4s and wins of the list, but I will go over quickly. For the decks that had more than 5 top 4s, we only had 4 of them. Tivit and Sisay had 7. Kinnan had 9, so pretty well following the stats. And then Tymna Krom had 16 top 4s for the quarter. When you look at wins, there were only 10 decks that won a tournament this past quarter, this past 3 months. Only 10 decks of the events that we're looking at, 64 or more players. Most of them had 1. So Cormella, Tameshi, Kenrith, Quark Sakashima, Talion, and Tivit all had 1 win. Dargo Thrasios had 2. Sisay had 2. Kinnan had 3. Tymna Krom jumps all the way up to 8. Like Eric had mentioned, 8 wins versus the next highest deck being 3. That's a lot. That's a lot that it's doing well at every number that you look at. And that some of the decks that we looked at that had really good numbers, like Najeela is on the up, it's on the come up, didn't have a win this quarter. Rocksai didn't have a win. Magda didn't have a win. Tymna Krom's eating good right now. So is it doom and gloom? Do we need a ban? Is MH3 going to change everything? Will MH3 save us with some new broken 5-color commander that's even better than Tymna Krom? What's our prediction for next quarter? Because next quarter is going to be really big. Because we're going to be looking at the tail end of MH3, I think, coming out. I think that's in June.
like how maybe Lord of the Rings fell last year for us when we did our review. Like Bowmaster just kind of got started, and so is the One Ring, and we didn't really get a ton of like data from that until the quarter after that was from July, August, September, and then we got to see like, oh, the One Ring and Bowmaster is in almost every deck that can play it. Yeah.
So pre-release is June 7th, and that's when pretty much most tournament organizers let you play with the cards. So we'll just barely see a little bit of MH3's impact, like you said, and then by the next quarter, our third update, we'll really see what's going on.
But we will know its impact because of the town.
It's gonna be like the first big major. I tweeted that out, that MH3 will be legal at that 12K. This has been our quarterly update. As expected, Tymna Kraum is kind of booming and zooming. There are some decks on the come up. At the rate that we're going, we could see Sisay continue to move up. We could see Atraxa fall off this list for the first time. It definitely trended way downward. I kind of expect Najeela to stay where it is. I kind of think it's like appropriately where it kind of is right now in terms of its performance. Kinnan, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a drop in the entries, especially if players keep going to events and not doing well with it, that they might get a little frustrated, move to something else. We could see those players move to something like Sisay or, some other kind of mana dump kind of commander. We'll see next time. We'll just barely get to see the impact of MH3. You can expect us to talk about that set as it comes out. Probably the only set, or one of the only sets I ever do actual preview content for, because I don't know if you were here for MH2 and MH1, but those sets changed the format. So, as always, thank you so much for watching. Go play cEDH. Have a good one, everybody.